Leander, it's Andrew Naudine, host of Lean In Leander, and your friendly neighborhood councilman, Place 5, in case you didn't know that. I'm here in studio here at Lantern Media Studios for the latest episode of Lean In Leander, and for this one I thought we would spend some time with something that's very topical for the city right now, and a friend of mine who I was able to convince, for some strange reason, 5 years ago, to sit down with a guy with a couple of Apple iPhones recording this crazy idea of a podcast. So the gentleman to my left is Alex Tynberg. He is the principal behind the Northline Development project. So again, it's been 5 years, but Alex, thanks for coming back around to have a little chat.
Thank you very much, and I think we both are surprised it's been 5 years.
Yeah, it's crazy because when we talked, like when we had the conversation centered around what was going to happen, right? And 5 years later, we're actually talking about what is happening, right? Because there was all sorts of things that happened, and we'll get into that. But, the Northline Development, again, when I was talking to Alex about 5 years ago, what we were talking about was this mixed-use development next to the Cap Metro rail station, and if you're not familiar with exactly where it is, and you should be, but if you're not, it's north. San Gabriel Parkway is north of it. To the east is the 183 tollway. The west is the railroad tracks, and then on the southern border, it's the Austin Community College, which will now expand to there's some additional residential in that area. There's a new apartment complex going up for those of you who travel westbound on Hero, right by the tracks. You know that's going on. There's a Crunch Fitness, I think, is what's going in on the corner there. And then, of course, everybody's excited about the Home Depot project that's over there on the corner. But that's to the south of Alex's properties, which, if you're familiar with them, I mean, you kind of know where the Austin Community College is. You've already broken ground and have people living there in luxury apartments and townhomes, right?
Correct.
And there's also there's a turnabout, right? And there's some art there.
There's a civic space and what we've called Northline Circle that is positioned right in between the 343-unit Gramercy at Northline apartment complex, and we've got 25 townhomes, 4-story attached, rooftop terrace, elevators, really high end.
Yeah, they're super nice. They're super nice.
On the other side, on the west side, and so we have started our civic space development piece with that circle. And there's a significant art piece in the middle of that civic space, which we're very proud of as well.
Yeah, no, it's super, super nice. And actually, I recommended that as the backdrop to our city council photo. We're going to take a photo with the new council. After the special elections, we finally have everybody in their places. So we're going to do the picture. And that's what was my recommendation. We'll see. I don't know. I just thought that would be a good backdrop. But, the whole point of this, the concept was to create Leander's, really the major urban core development project for the 39, right? So, 39 square miles that comprises Leander from, east to west, north to south. And this, to me, has always been a keystone, right? This was the project that, in my mind, even as a civilian, I was looking at this and I was like, this could be something really, really special and really different in the area. And a lot of people will equate it to like a domain type space or something like that, but I never saw it like that. Like that was never what I thought would come up in that area. And I'm super happy that we've been able to get there. So for those of you who don't necessarily follow the news on a daily basis, you probably have heard something, or maybe you've heard rumors, or maybe someone mentioned it, or maybe in passing, I don't know. But, one of the things that I like to do here at the podcast is obviously really focus in on what's moving the needle for the city, right? And my position as host is somewhat improved with my position as a council member, because I do get to get a little bit more information and get a little bit more educated on these types of projects. And I was really, really happy when I first came on council. Alex was super nice. We had lunch. And I talk about what was kind of in the works and where things were going and what we thought might be able to come. Because obviously, as a strong advocate for the project, I wanted to definitely be aware of where we were when I took my place on council. And what's been really, really nice about that is that in that ensuing 10 months, 10 months, something like that, these projects have come to fruition. And, I wasn't able to talk about it for a long time because of confidentiality agreements and things like that. But I knew what was happening, right? And it was super exciting. And I'd hear people and they'd be like, if we could only blah, 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 right? And I was like, if I could only tell you what we're doing, right? Because it's super cool. But anyway, so for you in the audience who maybe you're not as aware, or just to kind of clarify exactly what we'll be talking about here, this episode will focus on the newly approved partnership between the City of Leander, Northline Leander Development Company, and St. John's Properties. And what we're really going to want to try to do here today is kind of explain the agreement, what we feel the economic impact is and will be, and what it means for for Leander's kind of downtown or city center strategies, right? And we talked about this. What's ironic about this is this was the same conversation we were having about 5 years ago, right? And we were talking about, at that time, water was a stronger concern because we hadn't really completed some of the Bruca improvements. And so there was a lot of conversation that we had that centered around the availability of water. Would we be able to support this? Infrastructure a little bit. We talked a little bit about that. I think there was still a pending conversation about, Cap Metro and just some of the things that would play into the puzzle that is development, economic development as a whole is very complex. And it's one of the things that I'm sure you can speak to more than me is, some of the complexities that come with that. So we know where we were about 5 years ago, which is kind of where we are right now. And we had COVID and there was the economic disruption and, shortages, in wood and steel and concrete and all the things that happened.
Transformers.
Yeah, in the last 5 years, right? So when people dream of projects like you've dreamed of this project, they don't take into account I won't call them nightmares, but the challenges that come between the time you have the dream and kind of making the dream come to fruition. So talk to us a little bit about that, because that was a challenging time for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think it's maybe helpful to sort of look at this from a sort of 20,000 square foot view, at this idea of developing a town center urban project in the suburbs in Austin. And it's a vision that the city of Leander has had for many, many years based upon the zoning that the city created for this area. Obviously, it was spurred by the Cap Metro stop, and the city wanted this sort of development to happen around that rail stop, and that was a part of the sort of impetus behind bringing the rail up to Leander. Is creating that transit-oriented development concept. And so I think it's safe to say that the one thing I do want to relay to the audience here is this is really hard to do. It's very hard to do. It's it would have been a whole lot easier to have developed this project out in a much more less dense, I'll call it horizontal mixed use,
linear mixed use,
and there's parts of that we're doing because that's the only way this stuff's going to get done. Mm-hmm. But we definitely have held firm to the vision of vertical mixed use in many aspects of the project, which create the important property tax benefits mm-hmm. to the city long term, mm-hmm. which is the whole original impetus behind the vision of this project, is to create this tax benefit for the city, and you get that through density.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we talked about that. Yeah. Again, that was kind of one of the major points of our conversation 5 years ago,
right?
About creating a dense urban center, exactly. Right, and going vertical,
right?
Because while there are tremendous benefits to diversification of the tax base, specifically in Leander. It's something that I've talked about, a lot in just general conversations with folks, and also, in the last year or so that I've been on council. That's, what are we doing to ensure the long-term stability and feasibility of supporting public services, safety concerns, police, fire, EMS, those types of things, that you need to have a viable tax base that has flexibility in being able to address that. So Leander historically has been kind of a bedroom community, sort of, and there was a decision right around the time that some of the things you're talking about with the rail and a couple other key decisions that were made within the last 20, 25 years, where Leander pivoted and said, you know what, we want to be a little bit more than just a residential area, and we moved away from that high, residential development process, right? And we made the decision we want to diversify our tax base. And so you can see it now. Like you see a lot of the retail centers or retail, transit centers, right? Not necessarily all drive-through, but there's that component in there. Right across from where Northline will go up on 183, we have like Paris Bagel now, and Crust Pizza, and there's Cold Stone ice cream. I always want to call it Stone Cold ice cream. I still think that's a huge marketing opportunity that they missed, right? Oh, that'd be so great. But anyway, so you kind of see it now, right? And people are getting the restaurants and the conveniences that the reality of our economy right now is that we are driven by convenience.
Yeah.
And so that was a big component, there was a piece that was missing in Leander. It wasn't convenient. You couldn't drive 5 minutes to get to Jersey Mike's. You'd have to drive 20 minutes, and that's an inconvenience in the modern world, right? But we're addressing that. But it's still this component, this dense urban center that builds daytime traffic, that builds,
Exactly.
Job centers and things of that nature. That does not happen without this type of project. It just doesn't. Or if it does, it takes tremendously longer to get to that. So what you want is that dense urban center, which I've always advocated for, and then combine that a little bit with like the Old Town Leander concept. So there's a number of things that will come together here, right? So let's kind of talk. We'll take them one at a time. So the first thing is, let's talk a little bit about some of the key highlights. The city of Leander is investing $4 million. It's a performance-based economic development loan. And that is going into and is part of the construction of a 95,000 square foot multi-story commercial office building, which will rise, and if everything goes right, we'll have that up next year, right? Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely. So I'd love to touch upon some of these points, Andrew, that you brought up. You talk about really the commercial aspect of development being critical to changing what Leander is from a bedroom community to something more a daytime population. And I mean, really what my goal in creating this project is to create traffic into the city during the day, to create this hub, this commercial hub for the city, representing its really future downtown core. And there's a couple really critical product types that will help to realize this vision. One is retail that you mentioned. The second is office, which we're going to talk about. And I think there's a couple kind of 3A and Bs, which I think are medical office and hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been the objective by the Northline Development is to bring those users to the project, but to develop them in a way that allows for this great density to happen. And we were very fortunate that you mentioned the Southbrook Station project, which is just to our west, with the Perry Baguette and these other really great users. That was developed by the group that developed the domain, Endeavor Real Estate Group. And I reached out to them when that project was really starting to sort of formulate, and they saw the demand for retail in this market being so strong. And they knew that because of the early success that was taking place for Southbrook Station, that they could do something very special at Northline. And so we brought the Endeavor along board, and we talked about why has this taken so long. One of the things that Endeavor, knowing that they understand vertical mixed use, where it can happen, how retail needs to be developed, they obviously, having done the domain and having developed some single story important development at the domain that's at the frontage sections, they felt that was very important to help facilitate the rest of this project. And so we had to go through a zoning change with the city to get there. And what you see at the domain when you drive in is a Whole Foods on one, with a surface parking lot. And then along Mopac, you see all these restaurants that have surface parking. That's exactly the vision that they wanted to start with at Northline. And so we went through a process that took about a year to get approved. And now we're 4 months into construction. And by the end of this year, this initial phase that Endeavor's doing is 85,000 square feet of retail. It's going to be significant. We're going to have open retail restaurants and stores by the end of this year, and all of that building will be up and running by the first quarter of next year, which is basically a year from now.
Yes, which is super, super exciting, and it's a shot in the arm to the local economy, which we're fortunate. The stewardship of Leander prior to the current administration and the current city manager and things of that nature, you have to give them some credit in this whole process because they were very, very conservative about the way that they did anything, right? And as a result, Leander has excellent credit rating and is well positioned to do what it is that we're doing now. So you got to give props where props are due, right? I don't know that I would argue that maybe that was not necessarily purposeful, right? I think it was a risk aversion, to be perfectly frank.
I think you're right.
But that's the reality. Sometimes things turn out a little bit different than what you really expect them to, right? But that given, again, we're in a really, really good position to do this right now. And, without getting super political about it, I think one of the main things that this shows is that the city itself, and as a representative for the community on the dais, is listening to not only what it is that the community generally wants, but also listening to the economic indicators and realizing what is actually happening here. It's not just guesswork. It's purposeful. It's with intention, right? You mentioned the retail and Endeavor and coming in, and they recognize that there's this demand here. The demand is driven by things other than people just wanting the convenience, right? I mean, if you look at Austin and you look at the cost it is to do business in Austin, it starts to push people beyond that city limits, right? I saw it happen in Houston, right? And just the cost in Houston got so expensive. And now they benefit from zero zoning, so it's easier to build stuff out there. But at the end of the day, it was pushing stuff out from the city center, and that's natural in major cities. And with Austin, San Antonio, and the Central Texas corridor becoming what it is, and you add in the Huttos and the Taylors and the Samsungs and all that stuff that's going on, it pushes that. It pushes this economy and these economic drivers to areas that will be able to benefit if they're properly positioned, which again, I think that's key, is that Leander is properly positioned. It's been a little long in coming, and I know people get a little, I don't want to say inconvenienced, but, impatient with that, right? But, again, you and I, we talked 5 years ago. It doesn't seem like it was 5 years ago. It seems like it was just the other day. But that's kind of the process, right? So the way that the city is approaching this is, again, I'm getting down. Let me get back to the investment. The investment is it's a loan, right? And there's milestones and things of that nature that are tied into it. So there are guardrails to the process. But the primary thing is that the city is leasing 40,000 square feet for city offices where they're desperately needed. Council chambers are in there too. So we're going to kind of create a new city hall. It's not a permanent structure. It could potentially stay there, but the idea is that we literally have staff working out of closets right now, right? You can't do what we're trying to do and have that be the case, right? So we need to go somewhere where we can grow, and this allows us to be able to do so. And if I understand, and I don't want to get too far on that, that building has some other interested parties, right?
Absolutely, I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. Let people know.
Yeah. So just to sort of back up a little bit, I as the master developer, I bring on what I view as best-in-class vertical development partners to build the specific product types. So we have a great partner that built the multifamily, a great partner that built the initial townhomes. We have another partner coming in, Drees Custom Homes, to build more townhomes. We've got a senior living deal happening with a great partner called Vrio Capital. Endeavor, obviously, is a household name here, best-in-class retail developer. We found the same sort of best-in-class office development partner in St. John Properties a number of years ago, and they actually designed a 4-story building there. It was 120,000 square feet, and for 55 years, this company, which is based out of Maryland, has built all on spec. They have a multi-billionaire owner who guarantees these projects with his personal wealth. Banks would fall over the opportunity to be involved as a lender, and this was basically a no-brainer early on. Bringing them in, they designed this building, they got it permitted, and they had a tremendous challenge getting the debt, even though they have the equity there in place and a guarantor for the construction loan. Office was a dirty word for years, and we asked, we talked about the delay factor in some of these projects. I mean, that's what delayed our office project. And so as things started to get better last year, banks started to actually look into this potential, but they required a pre-leasing requirement. For the first time, this company has never dealt with that before. And so we needed to surpass a 50% pre-lease requirement. The decision was to basically take a floor off the building and make it more manageable at 95,000 square feet. And we started to get some interest, we being my partner, St. John, who's leading this process, got a couple banks to even kind of take a look at it. And over the last 12 months, with the city coming in as the anchor tenant, that basically enabled us and propelled us to be able to move forward. And so we have retail on the ground floor facing 2 frontages, and the retail is obviously a much easier product type to lease up at this point in time versus office in a suburban market like this. And so the retail's easier, and we have really good momentum there. We've got the city coming in at 40,000 square feet. St. John is going to move their offices to that location as well. And then we do have a 3rd story. So the city's taking all of the 2nd story, a portion of the 1st story. There's retail and some other users that we have lined up on the 1st story. The 3rd floor was basically, the last piece, but we have a large 20,000 square foot user that is in negotiation to lock that up. That leaves very little left.
Right.
and it's my sense that, and it's always been the mantra by St. John, is once you start construction and you have a timeline, that's when you get your leases done.
Yeah.
And we've been in this catch-22, having to pre-lease a very challenging scenario. And so now that we have, a timeline and it looks like things are going to really propel ourselves here. We're in final permit process with the city. I hope and expect that we'll get permits released in March, if not April, and be off to the races to start construction shortly thereafter. And I expect by the time this building is completed, it'll be 100% leased.
Yeah, no, I think that's exciting, and the intentional effort here to provide the spark, right?
Yeah.
I think that sometimes can be misunderstood and not necessarily like the complexity of the deal, right? And what we're talking about. So that's what people don't know, right? When you get into those, you don't think about that when you're reading a quick little blurb in community newspapers, right? It doesn't give you context. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do here, is to help people understand, hey, this is super, super exciting. Like this is a milestone,
huge,
in the development of the city, right? And there's a few other things that are part of the deal that I kind of want to touch on a little bit. So part of the way that the city has structured this is this, again, the lease is the primary trigger, right? That's the thing that gets it started. And then, the city, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but the city has an option if we want to extend the lease. There's a couple of things in there that let us stay a little bit longer if we need to. But the intention is to build a city hall in the same area, like in the same urban district. And I know that that's already kind of part of the process and part of the project. And that'll probably happen a lot faster than what I think right now. Like right now, I'm being real conservative, right? But I think that's going to happen a lot faster than what we think. And then I believe, help me understand, because this is one piece. I know that it's always, well, Alex is going to do this, right? But help me and help the audience understand the dedication of the 1 acre, right, for municipal purposes.
Yeah.
How is that part of this project? Help people understand what that is.
Yeah, and you described, Andrew, all the pieces here, and really this is giving the city tremendous flexibility with the vision that we all have to bring the city core to this project, to the city's downtown core. It makes a lot of sense, and frankly, it was the original vision years ago when this got passed by the city back in 2018. The city always had representations by leadership that it would eventually all want to be in the downtown, and that's not to say Old Town is not an important aspect of the city.
And it is. It's something that we'll definitely touch on here.
Yeah, and so there's repurposement of those buildings. This is giving the city flexibility to do all that. It's a jigsaw puzzle with the city's facilities plan that this scenario is giving the city tremendous flexibility to be able to do a lot of different things in a time frame that gives it flexibility to do so. And so, first and foremost, the city now can move into a brand new building in about a year and a half in a scenario where the city can showcase its wonderful location, which frankly, this is not coming from me, this is coming from the city representatives. It really doesn't have the ability to do so now.
Right, like I said, there's literally, and I'm not even joking about this, okay, this is not a joke. There are literally staff members who are working out currently in the current facility in rooms that were used to be closets, right? They've been converted so that they can actually house staff. And again, that's kudos to them. like if I took a job and they're like, hey, here's your closet, I don't know that I'd necessarily be like, what did I get myself into? But the excitement that this will bring, not only for the city, but for the city staff. Yeah. Like now you're in this brand new facility. That's a supercharger, right? For just how you feel about what it is you're doing. And I mean, just like, it's human nature. Like when you're working on something, it's so much easier to work on projects where there's a tangible output, right? Yeah. And
a great benefit for
absolutely,
the city and the chamber, the council, the chamber. All of this is going to be a significant benefit for the city. And so just to kind of, again, touch upon the deal here, this was a three-party deal. It was mainly between the city and St. John Properties, who will own a significant block, basically an 8-acre block. And the city negotiated quite intelligently the ability to be able to create its own chamber and office building that it can own just outright. Obviously, it's moving into a lease situation. It's a mixed-use building. There'll be retail. There'll be other tenants upstairs. There'll be other tenants on the first floor. And now the city has the ability, with a flexible time frame, to be able to acquire another section of that block to build its own building and park its own building and have a permanent owned city facility.
Mm-hmm.
And the city didn't stop right there. They also worked with me to fulfill another vision, which is to create what is most likely a public library, museum, and or cultural center facility adjacent to that future city hall location. And if you look to our south, the two cities to our south, which are great examples of municipalities that put effort and dollars into their municipal library facilities, which are really showcase not only showcase buildings, but also big drivers of the community to those locations. The folks I'm close with who are building out the Bell Boulevard project in nearby Cedar Park were very surprised at the level of activity generated by the library.
Mm-hmm.
And it really highlighted the wonderful beneficial nature of that use in a mixed use downtown, urban center. And so we are all aligned that is a wonderful approach that the city is taking here. And I voluntarily agreed to donate an acre for that purpose to help collectively realize this vision.
Now, I love the way that you said that, the way that you frame that, because I think people need to understand that, right? And it's a gift, and that for me, and not only as a member of the Leander community, but for somebody who is in a position right now where we can kind of help steer some of that vision. That is to me the central tenet of this entire agreement. Personally, that's the way I look at it. It's like, look, all these other things are kind of business arrangements, and not that this isn't, but
and there's something to it. There's some give and take.
Sure,
with reimbursements that are happening that I definitely want to be clear. But
it's still a step. It's a step. It's an extra step. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of circle back around to is that when you and I met 5 years ago, one of the things that I really emphasized in that episode was like, you're not just a developer, you're someone who's investing in our city, right? And to me, that is indicative of just how far you've gone and how far you're willing to go to invest in this city, because that municipal plot, that 1 acre, right? I have my dithers, I have things that I'm advocating for, and the cultural center aspect of that is something that I think would really be a tremendous benefit, not only to Leander, but to the region, right? Because it's a component that I feel is kind of underserved, and I think that that's something that could really elevate what we do in the city. But with that said, that none of that is possible without, your willingness to take the extra mile. So I do want to thank you for that.
Thank you. And this is a public-private partnership. It has been since 2018. This is a second kind of sort of, call it threshold to that partnership, is the city providing a 380 agreement to our vertical development partner. one thing I think we haven't quite talked about is the loan aspect, and why is that happening? And as part of the loan that was being coordinated by my partner St. John Properties with these banks, the level of debt that they were willing to give also was significantly reduced from the typical norm. So not only were banks not willing to loan at all, but that when they did get to the sort of table to say we're willing to do something, they said, well, we need much lower leverage. You need to bring more equity to the table,
Right.
And you know, this is more iffy of a proposition than in the past, because office is going through what office has been going through with post-COVID and all that you guys need to pre-lease this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the loan was to address the unique market scenario that we were dealing with, that the amount of equity that needed to be brought to the table was significantly more than has been the case for St. John Properties. And the city stepped in and said, we can provide that loan. We have obviously access to debt that can be done at certain levels, and that was a huge driver to being able to kind of move this project forward. And I think the city's risk here, which is I think something you also wanted to get into, is extraordinarily low. Just given who St. John Properties is, where we are with the lease up of this building, and the level of default potential that St. John would have here is so minor on the grand scale of things. This is a company that has never defaulted on a loan in 55 years. So the city vetted that very, very thoroughly, and decided to move forward in what I feel is a very intelligent manner.
Yeah, and I think that, again, is a very important point, and I'm glad you're making it. Because the thing is that when you look at these types of projects, and this is true of pretty much anything that the city does, to be perfectly frank, and it's one of the things that gets lost in the mix of stuff that happens when people talk about what's going on in your city, right? There are a few people who will dig into the details and really understand some of those components, and that's great. You want those people. But by and large, it's like average Joe is asking, hey, is this a good deal for us, right? And what I'm really trying to stress today and in this conversation is this: this is a really good deal for us, right? We are really well positioned. The city manager, Todd Parton, deserves a lot of credit, because he was instrumental in putting together the components that we've been discussing and how they would work together, and really kind of working through that complexity and the convoluted state of a lot of the moving pieces. Because to your point, you're dealing with multiple partners here, right? And then you add in banks and their needs and their wants, right?
Private decision making that no one can control.
Yeah, and so when you can align all of those things in the way that we have, it's celebration worthy. It really is. And I'm super excited about this project on that note, and on just what it will mean for the long term. So you talked a little bit about the flexibility that this gives the city. So what people will miss in the conversation is like, okay, great, you're building a new city hall. That's where my tax dollars are going, in that kind of conversation. Like, yeah, and we're also looking at all these other things that we can do now, right? Because the city owns the current city hall and municipal hall there that's on Brushy, and has been, I think, frankly, struggling with how to activate Old Town. Like, it's been a very, very difficult process, and I've been involved in such a way, both inside and outside of that process, that you can see there's a vision for what it is that we want that to be, and there's a very purposeful economic sentiment behind how that needs to come together, right? Because it is part of that larger diversification of the tax base. It needs to be a driver, and it needs to lend itself to the component and the overall structure that'll be comprised between, Crystal Falls and San Gabriel. Like that chunk of land needs to do something, needs to be activated in a way that becomes very central to what it is the city can point to, can use as an example, can really activate the economy out here in Leander in such a way that those tax dollars stay here, right? So there is going to be a little bit of a bleed over to Liberty Hill. I recognize what they're doing there with the Costco and the Target and all that stuff, right? But that bleed is going to probably be essentially the same as it would have been with the existing facilities in Cedar Park, right? So we're kind of bookend with that large box retail stuff. So I don't know that the dollars necessarily bleed more. I think it's just a split of where the dollar goes now. What is it easier to drive to Liberty Hill, or is it easier to drive to Cedar Park, right? That being the case, we as a city need that stickiness to get people to stay here and be here and spend their tax dollars here. And obviously the retail piece of that is a big component, but the economy of scale and the job creation is another really big piece of that. And as we continue with some of the light industrial and biomed and the things that we're targeting for the city, they need office space. They need somewhere to go. And that's where I think, and I felt this way from the minute I moved out here, like in 18, like when I moved out here, I saw it and I was like, wow, this is really well positioned for these things to potentially happen, right? Light rail plays a big component of that because it moves people between a large metropolitan center and a suburban urban development, right? So you have ease of access, multiple points of access. As we continue to develop Hero Way, as we continue to develop 2243, and we get that connection over to 35, now you have east-west traffic as well as north-south traffic. So it's just all of those components coming together and really being like, okay, these are the things that really make for a diversified tax base, and as long as we're able to get all these components together, and yours is a keystone, it's a key piece of the puzzle. It's not the only piece, right? But it becomes that one fixture. It gives us the commercial momentum that we need. St. John's is a national property. They have national visibility. So it's a validation for what it is that we're doing out here. It lends into that strategy where we can have a complementary Old Town strategy. That we have. When you're talking about density in an urban center, and what I imagine that probably ends up looking like at the end of the day, is that you need space. There's always a need for space for congregation and community and whether it be events or anything along those lines, right? But to have it close by is key. That's such a difference. You can point to our neighbors to the south, right? And we recently did the MLK project event with Cedar Park, which was new this year. We've normally done it here in Leander, and one of the things that was driven by was the facilities, right? Cedar Park has these really, really nice facilities, right, from a city perspective. But I was looking at that and I was saying, this is nice, but I really had to drive like all the way over here, right? And I imagined, what if MLK was in Old Town and you're, less than a mile, right, away from from City Hall, right? Does that create a parade route? Or all the things that you could possibly think about, right? And you're like, that's different. That's way, way different than I think anything else in the region.
Once the Northline vision is realized, there won't be anything like it up here.
Yeah, no, not
it
at all.
will be so outstandingly unique to the municipalities in Williamson County that surround us.
Yep.
That I just can't wait for that to happen.
No, I can't wait either. I think, to me, I've always kind of like thrown out like that becomes a gateway, right? And then the way Leander's positioned in Wilco, that is the gateway, right? That's how you get into Williamson County. So you have to go through Leander. and to be able to raise the economic power that the city has, just positions us so much better for future growth and the long-term stability of the tax base for the city, right? I think I don't know. Have I missed anything? Have we missed anything? I want to say we've talked about everything.
We've talked about a lot.
Right.
I mean, I feel like it would be prudent for me to explain a couple things just in terms of like where we are today from our last conversation and
you're jumping ahead of my prompt. Okay, so I had something set up for you.
Okay. Well, then I'll let you go.
So we were sitting together 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So now, if we're sitting here and I have you back 10 years from now, where it's 2036, what does success look like for Northline and the city's presence?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to go back first.
Oh, okay. Let's go back.
And then I'll go forward. I think I just want to give kudos to the city about the effort and work it's done over the last 5 years to position the city for the type of growth and development that we all hope continues to happen. Whether it be water or roads or wastewater. I mean, I've always been able to get a dedicated commitment from the city that it will support the vision of Northline, and that came back in 2018 when the city maybe wasn't able to give that commitment, but it's been able to stay ahead of the demand, and so that's great. And the city is super well positioned right now for realizing the type of development that we all expect and want to see. And that really played into just the Northline development in terms of the original agreement that we had, which was that Northline would spend a lot of its money on public infrastructure to support future development, and then there was a reimbursement component to that. And I just wanted to also kind of just highlight that the reimbursements that are happening are all just for public dollars and only based upon increment that the city has received, whether it's permit fees or wastewater, water impact fees, or increment to the property tax. So it was very smartly, intelligently structured. That original agreement, as has been this more recent, scenario.
So you're saying that there's some smart people involved at the city level.
If you really understand these agreements, they were well crafted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's good. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that because, again, as a citizen and then, by extension representing citizenry, it's important to understand that how well that has been done, right? And again, I said it at the top. I was like, you have to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
This has been a keystone to it is the key in the lock. I think if you unlocks the capabilities and the potential for the city of Leander, in my opinion.
They're all performance based.
Mm-hmm.
Is really the way to classify these, and that's the way smart, municipal agreements should be drafted.
Yep, it's due diligence, and it protects the city because, again, in the long term, what you have to do, and again, I don't want to get too political, but what you want to do is you want to protect the city's best interests, right? Sometimes that's not as easy to do because it can be kind of flashy. It can be very persuasive at times, some of the arguments that are made. And there are challenges that we have as a city to the way that we can negotiate and the way that we work through deals and structure things. That said, those challenges do provide us with, I think, the guidelines that help us to create those types of agreements, right? It just, they're kind of like I don't want to say we don't have any other choice, but the fact that we have to work within those constraints really lets us be very creative, right? So 2036.
Yeah, 2036. I guess it'll be here before we know it. But,
Right.
but my vision for 2036 is looking back on a really remarkable downtown community that the city's very proud of. I'm hoping that the city is able to move forward on its future own city hall, that the city can create a wonderful, municipal library, cultural center, museum across the street. That St. John, has winded its back right now and, moves forward and builds second, third, and fourth, office buildings that it has the ability to do, and Endeavor continues to build out its retail area. They have some option sections that we have some really interesting users that are in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's international.
so
as
then,
right?
then there's a whole different section
Okay.
on the west side of the project. But before we get to the west side, there's a hotel and convention piece.
Oh, that's right. We did get to that. How did we miss that?
That we're also working on right now. That is subject to 2021 legislation that Northline and the city partnered together back in 2021 to get the city on the list of about 45 municipalities across Texas that can qualify for this reimbursement from the state, which when there's a certain caliber of hotel,
Mm-hmm.
which is at least a limited full service, built with a minimum of 10,000 square feet of convention space, then the city, once that project is completed for 10 years, receives back all of the hotel occupancy tax and all of the retail sales tax, 6.25% collected by the state within 1,000 linear feet of that facility. They get that back, and they can use that state money in many respects to help generate this project with the hotel developer. And so we're having discussions right now about that potential, which is very exciting because that obviously is one of the key additional uses that we envision should happen within Northline. In fact, the city did create a report that it had done a few years ago, where it hired a third party to determine where that hotel location should be, and has some metrics around that. And the only location from that report should be in Northline. So we're excited to try to move that forward. We're also very excited for St. David's across the street to commence their full hospital.
Mm-hmm.
That's been another, when you ask, why have things taken so long? Post COVID, we've had, interest rates and, inflationary issues and delays with construction materials and challenges with, financial institutions, banks not lending, and oversupply of multifamily. That's been another another factor with why we only have one project in place at this point in time. Another big piece to that is the delay in the hospital across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And St. David's originally had 3 phases. The first was going to be the emergency room, which was completed in 2018 or 19. The second phase was going to be the full hospital, and the third phase was going to be this medical office building. Somehow they flipped and built the medical office building during COVID, and that has not filled up because the hospital hasn't started.
Right.
And originally the hospital was going to be 30 beds, and then it was going to be 60 beds, and then St. David's HCA announced in summer of last year it's now 100 beds because of all the unprecedented growth. This is their word, the unprecedented growth of Leander. But the community needs this hospital.
Absolutely.
And so I know the city is, working to see how they can influence that commencement start. But that's going to also help a lot of medical components to our project. We've had multiple development partners who want to build medical office who have gotten to certain points and just said we can't start until we know when this hospital campus is going to commence.
So you actually. So we did have other things that we needed to talk about. So I was a little premature in the 2036, but we'll go back to that. Yeah. You're spot on, right? I want to get to. Let's talk a little bit about the hotel thing because as a former hotelier myself, and I worked in the city of Houston, and I understand the compression issues and all that kind of stuff that comes into play with that. Again, at a very, very critical period with where we are right now. And it's hard to understand unless you really kind of understand all the components. But, just to make it simple, the city of Austin has decided that they are going to rebuild their convention center. So they knocked it down. It's gone, right? And so that creates a fragmentation of the hospitality and the convention business that normally would come to Austin. Austin is a destination location similar to San Antonio, has a different vibe, right? And San Antonio is very transfixed on the Riverwalk, right? That's you're there or you're not anywhere, right? And Austin really doesn't they kind of resemble that a little bit, but not necessarily. There's a lot more to Austin. It's a little bit more diverse, still more spread out. So now you have this fragmentation of the hospitality component and all these hotels, and they're taking up all of this extra business that can't go into the convention centers. But it opens up a gap for additional hotel property within the metro, right? And I've always said this from the get-go, like literally the day that my wife and I decided to buy our house in Leander, because we knew we could ride the train into downtown, right? And I was always like, it'd be really cool if there was a driver at the end of the line. That's something that would bring people from the city out here, right? And hotel becomes a really big component of that. It's a big piece of that process, right? So, it's nice to see what they're doing in Cedar Park with the Shields project and that Marriott that's going there. Be fantastic to have that Marriott at Northland. That would be so fantastic. But that's not going to be reality. So that shifts what we can do, right? But there's still the same issues are going to come to play, and I think it still bodes well for Leander because of the rail line. You have an ease of access for hoteliers in the city center to push out to the Leander area, right? We need an extra 50 rooms or whatever it might be, and that's okay. We're going to put you on the train and we're going to send you to Leander to our other property over there, whatever how that looks, right? I think that's something that if we have it, again, not to quote movies, but if you build it, they will come. And I honestly think that's the case. Like, I think if you have that component there, it lends to additional transient use, right? So I'm super excited about that, right? And there's a couple things we can't really talk about, but I think those are the ideas, the prospects there are really, really fantastic. I think they fit right in with the vision. And then, the additional development with the hospital. Again, all that does is solidify the process and the direction that we're taking as a city by concentrating our efforts on building, the employment centers that are going to help facilitate. I think there's three key things that are happening in the region, right? Biomed, and then you have obviously tech, right, and AI and all of that stuff that's going on. And then you have the Department of War, Department of Defense, depending on who you talk to. There's a new comm in Austin, right? So all of that is going to create the need for office space and the need for places to go. And I argue consistently, the people who are facilitating those small businesses that will be feeders into the larger players in that environment, in that economy, they can't afford to be in Austin. They can't. It's too expensive.
Yeah, the rental rate in the Class A office building that St. John is building, in many cases, it's 50% of what you'll get in downtown Austin, and that's a big discount to the domain.
That's a driver,
big time.
That helps people make the decision to come here, right? It helps them. It gives them incentive. We always talk about, well, what could the city do as an incentive? Well, hey, this is what the city's doing to create incentives. The investment in this property, investment in this process, right? The city is literally, and I think you could say this, the city's literally putting $4 million down so that people can have a 50% discount on their rent. I think it's a fair statement.
And the city's getting that $4 million back.
We're getting that back,
and the interest that it's paying, it's making money off of the $4 million investment.
Yeah, no,
so that's important.
It is important. It is, and again, this is what I love about the conversations with you, Alex. Is that you're first of all, as a businessman, you're very gracious in helping people understand that. Like, I really have always enjoyed our conversations because I'm not, I'm not a subject matter expert necessarily. I've learned a lot of things, and I stayed at a Holiday Inn a few weeks ago, so I've kind of picked up a few extra things. But I love that line. Anyway, but I really do appreciate you being as open and transparent about some of the process steps that are they're components of this type of development. And I know you have a vested interest. I'm not pretending that you don't. You do. Like, you take the risk, right? And I want you to have the benefit of all of that risk paying off for you. And again, when we get together in 2036, hopefully you're like, okay, I'm retiring now, right? Because it's been a long road, and that's that. I like you as a person. I've always appreciated your courtesy to me, but I do wish that upon you,
Thank
right?
you.
I mean, because that's important.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the type of person who takes that kind of risk, and you deserve the success that type of risk.
And this is all I've been working on for 8 years. So, and nothing's paid back yet. So it's a very, very long-term
right
proposition.
Right.
To the extent it works out the way we all hope, it's going to be a wonderful thing for the city.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I think we should reserve a room at the hotel when they open for 2036, and we'll do the interview in the hotel room.
That's great. That's great.
All right. Thanks, Alex. I really, really do appreciate this, and for you who listen and watch the podcast, I hope this is helpful to you and your greater understanding of exactly what the city's doing and how these things are moving along and what moves the needle in the city. When I first started doing the podcast, the idea was to introduce you to the people and the places and the things that make a difference for our city. This is all three of those, right? He's a person, he's the place, and he's the thing. So it's a very, very important piece of our economic puzzle. I want to thank Alex for his due diligence and his stick-to-itiveness over the years. Like he just said, it's been 8 years for him, and he still hasn't seen the light at the end of the tunnel. I think he's starting to see the light. I think
Things are really coming together.
Yeah, so we're both excited about that, and I really, really appreciate your time here today. Thank you. I think we went way over what we thought, but we'll edit down. All right, I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Alex. And thank you all for tuning in. And I'll try to be a little bit more. I won't space the episodes out quite so much. I know it's been since November. We haven't really had a talk, but I've been a little busy. But yeah, trying to get back to it and trying to bring you again the important items for discussion in our community. If you have any ideas or if there's anything that you'd like me to address, by all means, feel free to reach out. You can reach me through the website or on any other social media channels. And we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, folks. Appreciate your time.